everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Yesha if you're new here, and today we're going to be discussing the personal statement. There are so many ways to write the personal statement. For example, you can answer questions like challenges you faced, or why you're choosing your specialty, or explaining a part of your application that may otherwise not make sense. And it's really important to realize that first and foremost, you are not going to be able to answer everything that you want to answer. So choosing a couple of things that you want to talk about and sticking to them and explaining them thoroughly is more important than trying to address 6 different topics and somehow making a conclusion, trying to tie it all together. So really address at the beginning what you want to talk about and go from there, but don't overextend your personal statement. So tip number 1 is to use your personal statement to explain gaps in your application. So I've used this example before for myself, but basically I did every research project, I did every volunteer activity in pediatrics, and so for me that was a big gap in my application when I went to apply for radiology. So if you have something similar to that, you could answer that question about how you made that jump. And I think that's a really good way to use your personal statement to explain that gap that you can't do anywhere else in your application. A lot of people ask about using your personal statement to address red flags. So for example, low step 1 scores or step failures, things like getting a poor comment on your dean's letter or things like that, things that really stick out like a sore thumb and make the program director go like, why, the person's otherwise very strong, like why did this happen? So I think yes, you definitely should address the red flag. And I think I read online they were like, make it fast and like move on. And that's really true. Like just talk about the red flag and really focus on what you learned from it. Don't talk about why you failed and how terrible of a time it was for you, and this is, don't continue to talk like that and put yourself down. Say, I failed, I take ownership of that, and here's what I learned from it. And if you have a way that you can show that you grew, like for example, if it was a step 1 failure and you did really well in step 2, that's a really good idea. If you had a poor surgery score and then you did a surgery sub-I 4th year and you got a really good score, things like that. They're really good ways to show that you progressed and you grew, and you can show hard evidence that you did that. So focus on what you learned from it, focus on how you grew and how you can use that experience to improve in the future. Another thing you can do with your personal statement is to explain geographical ties to an area. So remember that the personal statements can be changed for every single program. And obviously if you're applying to 70 programs, that's going to be more challenging. But if you really want to end up in a certain area, it is, helpful to talk about why you applied to that school or to that residency program, and talk about especially why geographically you would like to be there. So if you have family there, if your spouse is there, etc., the personal statement is a really good way to address that. And you'll be surprised, programs love to exclude applicants based on anything because we get so many applications, and geography is one of them. Like, why would this person from Oklahoma come all the way to Boston for a program, for a residency interview and for a residency? And you would think that just because you apply, you are serious about going, but it always helps to take it one step further and show well, this is why. This probably goes without saying, but using your personal statement to explain your specialty choice is really important. This is especially true for radiology and other fields that are not required rotations, like ophthalmology, urology, anything that's not a required rotation. You should have to go the extra mile and show that you went out of your way to understand what the field is about. You want to learn about, what radiology really is, what radiologists really do, and show that somehow tie that into your personal statement. It's very interesting sometimes to read radiology personal statements when it's pretty clear that someone did not actually understand what radiology is about, and that can really hurt you. So make sure you know what the field is about. Spend time in different radiology subspecialties and really understand the different types of radiology that there are. That's really important, and I think, it's really obvious when someone doesn't, because you can tell that they really don't know what they're talking about. Don't let that be you. Oh yeah, and just to be clear, don't talk about the lifestyle or the money aspect of things. That's kind of a bad look. If you just don't talk about it. The next thing is to avoid cliches. Oh my god, you will be really surprised about how many times we have read that people are visual learners and therefore they like radiology, or they've always been artistic and using their eyes, and every specialty has to use their eyes. if you have like a very specific, you know, like if you're a real artist and you went to art school and etc., it's like a different thing than just like being someone who's like, yeah, I really like art and I appreciate art, and therefore I think that would really translate well into being a radiologist. Like really try to be more creative, think critically about why you chose radiology, and if you really can't think of a reason, I don't know, I can't really help you with that. What was my reason? My reason was that I really liked anatomy, embryology. I mean, in radiology you have to really know normal anatomy, normal anatomical variants. You have to know how things, you know, form like embryologically, because that's how you get all these variants in the first place. And so for me that was my reason. But yeah, the visual learner thing, we see it all the time. So avoid cliches and avoid things like, well, I became a radiologist because like my mom's a radiologist and she's cool and I liked it. Like just be more creative, really think critically about what you liked about your radiology rotation and go from there. That kind of segues nicely into my next point, which is that personal statements are allowed to be boring. They're allowed to be kind of dry, but remember that they can hurt you. As people sitting on the other side of the table, we never expect personal statements to be like this amazing piece of literature that we want to read and reread and reread. It's allowed to be kind of like, okay, that was good, like whatever, moving on. But if you have things like grammatical errors, if you have things like spelling errors, that can really hurt you. Further, if your personal statement is too long, no one wants to read things that are like over a page long. And if it's too short, then that's weird too, because you're like, why did this person not have enough to say? So about 1 page is the right length for your personal statement. And yeah, just really make sure you check your sentence structure, check your grammar, check your spelling, have other people check it for you, because as radiologists we are very detail oriented and we notice that and it looks bad on you. My last point is to talk about your strengths. So obviously you want to tell a residency program why they should pick you. And the best way to go about doing that is to discuss your strengths and what you bring to the table, and then discuss how that's going to help the residency program and how that's going to help radiology as a whole. And the easiest way to put that all into perspective is to talk about your career goals. So for example, if you like to write and you want to end up being academic, then that can be a really good way to talk about your writing strengths and the things that you've published and, you know, the asset that you were to your research team, for example. And that can be a really easy way to talk about that strength and still put it into perspective about what you want to contribute to radiology literature, for example. All right, I hope that helped. The reason I'm putting this up in April is because this is definitely the time you want to start writing your personal statement. I think that giving your letter writers a copy of your personal statement is really important, because then they can see what you're talking about. So yeah, make sure you give your letter writers a copy of your personal statement. It will help them understand who you are a little bit more. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the personal statement, and I will talk to you in the next one. Bye.
The questions that people have. No, what am I trying to say? Alright, so tip number 1 is using our personal statement to explain. There's the siren. Okay, tip number 1 is to use your. What? The next thing I want to talk about is like not focusing on. No, I'm gonna just get rid of that. And that can go for anything. I mean, teamwork. It can go for. I mean, what else? What other strengths do people have? I don't know.